What's going on, guys? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to our content, we create content like what you're watching right now simply to educate and engage individuals like yourselves on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia, and today we're going to be talking about Jeepers Creepers Reborn. This movie tells the story of a couple that heads off onto a horror weekend called Horror Hound, and essentially to put to rest whether or not the legend of the Creeper is in fact real until they come face to face with the infamous villain. Can confirm that this is a movie that does exist. This movie is easily one of the worst movies 2022 offered. It's including movies that we've already talked about, including The Bloody Man and Morbius. So if you've seen the third film, then you know how much of a CGI nightmare that movie is. Like, it looks terrible, and Reborn carries that tradition, or in this case, curse. They're just shots of, like, people walking. Like, actually, like, just walking, and you can notice the green screen. It makes sense for, like, seeing, like, high up altitudes and scenes like that. And, like, don't get me wrong, like, the climax, there are shots that are aerial borne. Those types of things make sense. But when your movie is just featuring 2 to 6 people walking from point A to point B, there is no need to have CGI. I saw this at the Fathom event, and the director did like a intro before he talked about some of the challenges that they faced in making this movie because they made it during COVID. And I don't know necessarily if the CGI was a choice to do that because of COVID restrictions or what that case was, but either way, this movie looks terrible. The movie comes back to the bedrock of where it all began, and that like weird like little tunnel, and we get to explore the house from the first film. Someone that kind of grew up with this movie, that is a cool thing to see. The cold opening, Gary Graham and Dee Wallace coming back to the tunnel. I thought that was a nice touch that they brought into it, and it kind of sets you into the mood to say, hey, we're not going to go anywhere else. Like, it's not going to be like a school bus, or it's not going to be some weird dare contest like the third one was. No, we're going to bring it back to where it all began. That aspect, I can really respect the filmmakers for coming back to the bedrock of where the franchise all started. And sometimes that ambition works, and sometimes it doesn't. I think exploring the house is a cool angle to hit on, but they don't really do anything with it. If anything else, it just is, it's wasted, honestly. It also feels like this movie has no original thought whatsoever. There's quite a lot of Jennifer's Body references. We've also covered on this podcast, and if you're looking for something that is better than this movie, links in the descriptions below. There's a weird subplot that takes place throughout the course of this movie, or at least the first 2 acts, where our main antagonist, played by Sydney Craven, essentially experiences these visions of someone getting ready to sacrifice her unborn child, and they try and introduce this whole witchcraft thing. What I find really disturbing about this thing in particular is it's almost like this coven is trying to feed the Creeper in order to kind of keep the rest of the town safe, and it feels kind of like it's stealing a subplot from Willy's Wonderland. Also, a movie that we have covered that is equally better than this movie, and our podcast is as well. Links in the description. Like, I don't even feel like this movie has cool gags. Like, there's nothing that would, like, make me sell someone on this movie. Just alone on the horror aspect of it. Like, the creature design looks good. It's altered from the original version, which I kind of respect it because the way that it's spun into the story is this is, in fact, the rebirth of the Creeper. And so as rebirths happen, you're going to look different, and I really admire that they ran with that. similar, but he looks just enough changed to where it looks like this is a brand new version of the Reaper that we're getting to see. So I like the way that the filmmakers actually gave us the Creeper. I feel like for past films, with the first one kind of excluded because I feel like the first one he was really building up to the Creeper. With this one, with 2 and 3, they just kind of kept him in the shadows, and this one they put him front and center, and I really liked that. The fact that we actually get to spend time with the Creeper and get to see him do stuff. Now, what I didn't like about the way that they used the Creeper is that anytime there was something bloody that happened, camera shot away. Looking for something gory and something to sink your teeth into, Jeepers Creepers Reborn is not it. Acting in this movie is passable. Performance is worth talking about. No, nothing is even worth discussing in this vein. The pacing of this movie is okay. It's there's never a part that really lags because it feels like the whole movie really lags just because there's nothing really interesting that happens. There's no character development. There is really no fun or no joy in this movie, and yeah, I mean it's a Jeepers Creepers movie. For any of those that were hoping to like have redemption with this movie, it is more like sand that slips through your fingers. Go ahead and just go ahead and rate this. I'm gonna, on our Rorschach rating scale, I'm gonna give Jeepers Creepers Reborn a 1 out of 5. This movie has a great like costume design for it. I really loved a lot of the costuming choices that they did in this movie, but outside of that, there's nothing that really makes this movie redeemable. It looks terrible. Some of it sounds terrible. The acting is alright. The pacing is neither here nor there. But honestly, this movie is just flat out boring. And this barely beats out Jeepers Creepers 3 as one of the worst in the series. I've seen Jeepers Creepers 4 or Jeepers Creepers Reborn as it's called. Comment below, let me know what you guys thought about it, but let's go ahead and talk about mental health. The idea of rebirth is always such a fascinating thing to me, and though this film does approach that in a very mythological way of this legend that was set up almost over 20 years ago in the first Jeepers Creepers back in 2001, I want to talk about the idea of rebirth for just a few minutes. The idea and the concept of rebirth is that it is essentially a new beginning and something that we can do. And I believe that sometimes when we are dealt with things that really impact our mental health, that is a chance for rebirth. Things like depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies, whatever the mental health crisis in question is, it's about how we respond to it. I've said this on here many times as someone who currently has ups and downs with depression, has definitely ups and downs with anxiety, and has also at one point even thought about committing suicide. It's about how you respond. And sometimes overcoming depression is something as simple as looking towards the next hour of something to be thankful for, waking up and saying, I'm glad I woke up today, I'm glad for my coffee, I'm glad for my family, I'm glad for friends, I'm glad for community, I'm glad that I have a job or a roof over my head. Really just flipping your perspective on what life has dealt you. Sometimes rebirth, it doesn't have to be this grand theatrical idea. It can be something as simple as just flipping the perspective of how we do things and how we see things, and ultimately having that within our reach. There are days where I wake up and man, it's just, you wake up and you just automatically feel defeated, and I kind of have to just catch my breath and say and ask myself, what am I thankful for today? What has life given me at this moment, at this stage right now? What is one thing that I'm thankful for, or what is right now in the present, and what is one thing I'm looking for into the future? Doing these cycles can kind of rebirth the way that we see life and the way that we see circumstances to truly make the difference. I hope this was a bit of encouragement to you, and if you or someone you know is currently struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, there's a mental health resource library link in our descriptions below. This video, over the next few days, Jeepers Creepers is going to be playing in limited release thanks to Fathom Events and Screen Media. I don't know what the current plans on video distribution or video on demand or anything like that, so make sure that you guys just keep checking socials and all of which you guys can find in the descriptions below. And while you're down there, make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button. Have a grand night.